Wassalamu alaikum. Welcome to another episode of World History Religion Lessons, and let's learn all about the Arab world. So let's do it. The Dar al-Islam, that's how you say the Arab world in the Arabic language. And I'm especially going to show you the historical period from 622 to 1258, which is the creation of the Islamic faith and the rise of the Arab world being a big cultural part of our planet today. So let's check it out. This is the part of the planet we're especially going to talk about: the Middle East, North Africa, parts of Southern Asia. Here are some people doing, I believe it's called the Shahadat. It's the prayer in the Islamic faith. And then right here, this black box is called the Kaaba, and it is inside of the Grand Mosque of Mecca. And every Muslim on planet Earth desires to go to this box someday because they believe it is the holiest place on planet Earth and a place where God has a connection to man. And if you actually were to look behind this guy's head, you would see this giant building, this super big clock tower in Mecca. This was only recently built in the last 20 years or so, and has this huge light that shines up just kind of like the Luxor on the Vegas Strip, and it shows people where the Kaaba is so they know where to pray. Pretty cool. Okay, so I said this at the start of the presentation. The way you say hello to someone in the Arabic language is Assalamu alaikum. It translates to peace be upon you. And if you say that, then the person would typically respond with Wa alaikum salam, peace be upon you as well. This is the only phrase I know in Arabic, and I have this long story that I usually share with my students about how this was hugely beneficial for me in my life. Just knowing this one Arabic greeting allowed me to befriend some people from the Arab world, and I'm still great friends with them even today. So be culturally literate, kids. Be aware of the world around you, and good things will come of it. So assalamu alaikum and wa alaikum salam. All right, so let's learn about the history of the Arab people. So since 10,000 BC all the way through 600 AD, so this is through the vast majority of human history, there were people living in Arabia. These people were desert nomads. A nomad is someone who doesn't have a city or a house. They just kind of set up a tent wherever they feel like it, kind of bounce from oasis to oasis. They're looking for water in the middle of this crazy hot desert. They worship many different gods. They're constantly fighting each other. They're really good warriors, actually, and that's going to come up later. But so this was kind of a chaotic, disunified part of the world. And yeah, Arabia was hardly ever even noticed by the ancient Romans or the ancient Egyptians, but it's obviously going to come into being a big deal once this period really gets going. So here's some of that fighting going on in the Arab Peninsula. Here's some people hanging out in the desert. These are statues of the old gods. And okay, so the main character of the story of the Islamic faith is a man named Muhammad Quraysh, born around 570 AD. And by all accounts, Muhammad Quraysh was a real dude. Okay, there's a lot of people who met him, a lot of people who wrote about him. He was born in the city of Mecca, and he worked for 40 years. So for the vast majority of his life, he was just kind of a normal standard dude. He would lead camel caravans across the desert. He would sell stuff. He was actually a very popular guy. A lot of people thought he was pretty cool. He was in sort of the family of the ruling class of the city of Mecca, and he was known for making deals, settling disputes. He was almost sort of like a lawyer in a way, even though the land has no laws. But yeah, he absolutely lived and was absolutely, by all accounts, a good dude. So this is kind of the idea. And yep, this is an image of Muhammad. Some Muslims would be very offended to this, but I found it on the internet, so there you go. And this is actually that same black box that you saw on that first slide. It was there in Mecca even before Muhammad was born. So Muhammad's going to like christen this box and make it a big part of the Islamic faith. And then, yeah, caravans in the desert. All right, so here's where the story really gets going. So right around when Muhammad was 40 years old, he had a vision, okay? Like he was sleeping in the middle of the night and he just hears these voices in his dreams, voices in his heads, go to the mountain, go to the mountain. And he's like, what? Like maybe I should do this? I don't know. And by all accounts, Muhammad wasn't like, he thought he might be going crazy, okay? Like he was not excited to speak with messengers from the gods, but this is what Muslims believe happens. So in 610 AD, Muhammad goes to this cave near the city of Mecca, and in that cave there is an angel. And this angel is also talked about in the Christian Bible, the angel Gabriel, the messenger of God. And Gabriel has a long conversation with Muhammad and says, Gabriel, God has been watching you, or he says, Muhammad, God has been watching you your entire life, and God wants you to be his messenger. God, I'm going to tell you the right way people should live their lives, and we want you to spread this message all over the world and get everybody to follow God this way. And Muhammad was really kind of freaked out about it. He's like, I don't want that responsibility. I don't want to be God's messenger on planet Earth. So he goes home to his wife. He talks to her about like how like crazy this experience was, and she says, I will be your first believer. I will follow the rules that this angel has told you. So that's pretty cool. And for the rest of Muhammad's life, he would actually have consistent visits from angels and vivid dreams from God, giving him more details to this message. And this is really important. Muhammad had no supernatural abilities, okay? He was not like Jesus. He was not like Moses. He was, by all accounts, a dude with no superpowers. He just had very vivid dreams and at times met with angels privately, which told him the right way to live life. Okay, so this is kind of an image of possibly that meeting. I love the Islamic interpretation of angels. They kind of look more like hawks with their wings. And yep, there's Gabriel showing what this world would be like. Here we go. I already said this story. So Muhammad's wife, Khadijah, thought, you're not a crazy man. I'll be the first believer in your God, or in this new way of interpreting God. So Muhammad took the title of Messenger of God, and it's traditional in Islamic sources, and you'll see these in some of the sources we have in my class, that after Muhammad has this meeting with Gabriel, every time you write the name Muhammad and you're referring to this Muhammad Quresh, you write, may peace be upon him afterwards. It's sort of this sign of respect that he had this relationship with the divine. He converted the rest of his family, he converted his best friends, and his new religion will be called Islam, and the people who believe in Islam are called Muslims. So sort of like Christians believe in Christianity, Jewish people believe in the Jewish faith, and Muslims believe in the Islamic faith. So that's what this one's about. And there's a lot of really cool primary documents of people who like met Muhammad, met his wife, met his best friends, and wrote about it. Because this is actually one of the newer religions in the world. So Muhammad starts spreading this faith around, and a lot of people, even some of the people in his own family, don't really like this new religion. They see that it's causing some upstarts. They don't want to change the nature of the city of Mecca, because Mecca was a place where a lot of religious pilgrims came and they prayed to these old god idols. Well, Muhammad openly talked trash about those old gods and said, my God's the better one. Well, so what happened was in 622, they kicked Muhammad and his family and all of his followers out of Mecca. They said, you're a threat to the old religions. We want you gone. And this event is called the Hijra in the Islamic faith. And in 622, that is sort of their version of year zero. So, according to Christian calendars and Western calendars, the current year is 2020 AD. But in the Islamic faith, the way they measure time is based on this year. So I think this current year is a little bit off. But right now it should be right around the year 1400. So if you ever do find yourself in the Arab world and you look at a calendar and it says 1400, you'll be like, what? Do we go 600 years back in time? Well, they just measure time differently. So Muhammad gets kicked out in year 622, and this is the sort of true beginning of Islam's struggle to become a global faith. And even after he gets kicked out, the people from Mecca start fighting him. He goes to this city called Medina. He makes some new allies there. So there's almost this like civil war going on in the Arab Peninsula. And every time Muhammad and his guys are outnumbered and they don't have good weapons, but Muhammad prays to God. He shouts the phrase Allah Akbar, and then they fight, and every time Muhammad wins. So Muhammad eventually beat the Meccan armies so many times, they eventually surrendered to him. Muhammad returned to Mecca. And when Muhammad returned to Mecca, he walked into that famous black box and he destroyed all the statues of the old gods. And he said, this is now the house of my God, the house of Allah. And he said, if you want to be a part of the winning team, join this religion right now. And so just about everybody in the city converted to Islam, and Islam started spreading even after that. So Muhammad Quresh taking command. All right, the symbol of Islam. Here's Islam's symbol. There's only one really respected symbol. It's the half moon and star. Sometimes you just get the half moon. And I mentioned this already. The Islamic name for God is Allah. And by a lot of the accounts that I've read, my understanding is Allah is the same God as Yahweh or Jehovah. It's just they interpret the Jewish and the Christian God in a slightly different way. But Islamic scholars will ultimately tell you that this is just an expansion of the Jewish and Christian faith. So, well, then there's definitely some subtle differences too, and I'll try to get into all that. So, yep, this is the symbol of the Islamic faith. All right, moving on. So the holy book in Islam is called the Quran, and it's always written in Arabic. You are never going to see a Quran only in English. If anything, you'll see it in English, and then like the left side of the page will still be in Arabic, because Arabic was the language that Muhammad spoke, and it's seen as a holy language. Also, Arabic is a very interesting written language. Like I have there in the bottom of the screen, the word Allah in Arabic. It's quite complicated, and it's the way that the letters are sort of drawn in this fancy way. They're seen as art, and if you ever go inside of a mosque in your life, you'll never see any pictures of Muhammad. You'll never see pictures of God. You'll only see very fancy calligraphy, very fancy words of Muhammad and of God and all of that. So that's interesting to know. All right, so this is what you would see if you opened up a Quran. There they have it in English. There they have it in sort of how you would say the Arabic in English. So it's kind of the English literary or direct verbal translation. And then this is the Arabic script. So that's kind of cool. And the word for God, ba-boom. Okay, so now let's really dive into what the religion's all about. So the Quran almost goes through kind of a history lesson at the beginning of it, where it lists out 25 prophets, 25 people who had a relationship with Allah over history. And it's very clear that Muhammad is the last prophet. Muhammad is prophet number 25, and there will never be prophet 26. Well, later in history, some people say they are prophet number 26, but hardcore Muslims will say they're all liars, because Muhammad, it's in the Quran, Muhammad's the last one. So who were some of those prophets before Muhammad? And a lot of those prophets I've actually already talked about in my class. The first prophet is Adam, the first man, Garden of Eden stuff. Abraham, the guy who sort of is seen as founding the Jewish faith, he's a prophet of Islam. Alexander the Great is mentioned in there as a guy who had a relationship with God, so that's kind of cool. Moses, the Jewish guy who parted the Red Sea. David, one of the first Jewish kings. And then prophet number 24, who Muslims generally love too, is Jesus Christ of Nazareth. So the Islamic faith is definitely builds off quite a bit from the Christian faith, which is pretty interesting. Oh, and I have the whole list of prophets on the left side of the screen there. And yeah, a lot of them are people mentioned in the Christian Bible and the Jewish Torah. All right, so yep, there's a dude reading the Quran, and here's kind of the picture version of the Quran. And I would ask students, what is this the picture of? And it's the birth of baby Jesus. So it's the whole virgin birth thing. Muslims believe in that too. Okay, so also some interesting aspects of the Quran. On every single page of the Quran, there is a reference to how wonderful heaven is. And it talks about, the ways you get to heaven, when you die, what happens to you. Your soul will ascend into heaven if you believe in God, or your soul will be damned to hell. And the descriptions of Islamic heaven, I think, are quite interesting. I'll share some of those with you now. Because it's not always called heaven, sometimes just called paradise. But the the Arabic word for heaven is Jannah. And Jannah is what is going to get referenced in a couple of these documents. So let's see what Jannah is all about. So verse 62 says, "Indeed, those who believed and those who were Jews or Christians or Sabians before Prophet Muhammad, those among them who believed in Allah and the last day and did the righteousness, will have their reward with their Lord, and no fear will there be concerning them, nor will they grieve." Okay, so this translation is basically saying, if you were a Jewish person or a Christian person before Muhammad showed up, you could very well be going to heaven. It's just Muhammad didn't change the course of faith until obviously after he was alive. So the idea is that all Christians before the year 600 are in Islamic heaven, which I think is cool. And then here's their visual picture of heaven. If we were in class, I'd ask you guys what you see, and I hope you would notice that heaven is kind of this like green water, plants, kind of paradise. And then here's another picture of kind of the idea of heaven, and it just looks like it looks like Oregon, And I've always found that Las Vegas students can really relate to this because they're like, hey, I've been living in a desert my whole life, and of course Arabia is a big old desert. So what do they desire? They desire water. They desire green plants. And that's what heaven is described as so many times. So let me read this to you guys. "When the dwellers of Jannah enter Jannah, an announcer will call, 'You have a promise from Allah that you will live therein and you will never die. You will stay healthy therein and you will never fall ill. You will stay young and you will never become old. You'll be under a constant bliss and you will never feel miserable.'" Wow, that's pretty great. What we got here? "The description of paradise with which the righteousness are promised, wherein there are rivers of water unaltered, rivers of milk the taste of which never changes, rivers of wine delicious to those who drink, and rivers of purified honey, in which they will have all kinds of fruits and forgiveness from their Lord, like that or unlike that of those who abide eternally in the fire and are given to drink scalding water that will sever their intestines." Ooh, man. So that's what hell's like. Ugh. Okay, more stuff about the Islamic faith. So there are 5 key parts of Islam called the 5 pillars of Islam. Boom. Pillar number 1 is a pillar that people can just knock out in a paragraph. It's you do this expression where you say, "I believe in the one God of Allah." And yeah, you would typically do it at a mosque in front of an imam, and it's just a kind of a ceremonious, I'm a part of the team, boom, you're good. What else do you have to do? You got to pray 5 times a day facing Mecca, specifically facing that black box. You got to give money to charity. That's called zakat, and I think it's 10% of all the money you make. You should give it to charity. Another one that I once kind of experienced this: fasting during the daylight hours of the month of Ramadan. If you ever find yourself traveling around the world and you have like a layover in, I don't know, Istanbul or Cairo or some largely Islamic city, and you're like, hey, I want to get some fast food in the middle of the day, they're not going to be open. Okay, they'll be open before the sun comes up, and then once the sun goes down. But like Ramadan is taken really seriously in the Middle East, and it's always around June or July. It's based on the lunar calendar, so it's a little different. Okay, so anyway, these are the first 4 pillars, and now I'm going to really jump into the final pillar. So yeah, boom, you got faith, zakat, Salat, Zakat, fasting, and Hajj. So let's talk about Hajj. The final pillar is this adventure that you are required to do once in your life. Some people do it many times in their life, but it's where you personally go to the city of Mecca and you go to that black box that I've talked about a couple times already. That box where Muhammad destroyed the old gods and consecrated it as the house of God. You perform several rituals around the city of Mecca, but obviously the big ritual is where you actually go to the box and you pray to it directly. It is the biggest human event in the world every year. I think before the coronavirus, the last one, there was like 6 million people who came there. So it's huge. Okay, it's like taking everybody in Los Angeles and bringing them to one place. It's amazing. All right, so yeah, the sacred journey. This is what you typically do while you're in Mecca during the Hajj, and everybody's there praying. Look at how everyone's focused around the box. Like that coordination is just impressive. And then, yep, there's that big old clock tower right behind the Kaaba. And boom, they want to actually keep building this out so they have enough hotels and housing spaces where they can actually accommodate the millions of people who come during Hajj season to pray at the Kaaba. And then boom, making it happen. Okay, so let's talk about some other things that are now associated largely with Islam. Sharia is a system of laws and government that's based on the Quran and the life of Muhammad. Not every Muslim is all about Sharia, but if you're a really hardcore Muslim, you're probably into Sharia. And Sharia is a connection between government and faith. Here in the United States, we talk about a separation of religion and government, but in some hardcore Muslim countries, that's definitely not the case. And Sharia generally does allow other religions to exist and operate in their country as long as they pay a special tax. And that happens quite a bit in world history where Muslims take over and they say, okay, you can keep being Christian or Jewish, you just got to pay double taxes. Let's see, what does Sharia talk about? Well, Sharia says Muslims are forbidden to eat pork, so it's just like the Jewish faith, so they kind of brought that with them. Muslims also are never to gamble, and they are never to drink alcohol. It's probably why it's not going to be super common to see Muslim people in Las Vegas. I mean, you'll see them every once in a while, but if they're a Sharia status Muslim, then they won't do that stuff. Very strict rules about how women are to act in public. If your country follows Sharia, women have probably got to be veiled. Strict rules about not drawing God or the Prophet Muhammad. There have been some situations where people drew kind of funny characters of Muhammad, and they were really, really, like, I think they were all killed for it. Doing an insult to a Quran is far worse than an insult to a man. I know there was a situation where a United States soldier burned a Quran, and like that just, like people just lost their minds. Also, many other codes with ancient punishments. I know that another one is like if a woman gets attacked sexually, then she like has to die. So there's a lot of hardcore stuff there in Sharia. So this guy's saying it's a Sharia controlled zone. I think he's posting these stickers around London. So he's trying to tell people don't do gambling, alcohol, high heel shoed women, drugs, none of that. Behead those who insult Islam. See, these guys are really hardcore. And then democracy is failing, Sharia is returning. I personally will never advocate for Sharia in America, but some of these people are. But keep in mind, though, the vast majority of Muslims in the world don't really follow hardcore strict Sharia. I could have told you guys about some hardcore rules in the Christian Bible and some hardcore rules in the Jewish faith. Those people aren't the common people. Most people are kind of doing just following those general rules I said in the beginning and not trying to impose other rules on other people. So here's some other words to know about the Islamic faith. Ummah is the term for Muslim people around the world. It's kind of like the Islamic community. You'll see that in a couple documents. Jihad is a war with permission from God, and a caliph is the leader of all Muslims. And Muhammad was, of course, the first caliph. So, and caliphate is the Muslim word for kingdom. So it kind of translates to king. And the greatest jihad is to battle your own soul, even or to fight the evil within yourself. The Prophet Muhammad, may peace be upon him. All right, that's it for part one. Peace out.